Hello.
Good morning, everyone. We're coming to you live from the QSITE 2015 conference here in sunny Townsville. We have with us today the lovely Dr. Michael Henderson, who has just presented a very thought-provoking and fun keynote all about wicked problems and playful design.
That's right.
Yeah. And you started off by sharing a bit of a personal kind of reflection of why you headed down the path of becoming an academic. And that's something that really struck a chord with me, because your research question was kind of like what has been in my brain for the last 10 years. So if you want to give us a bit of a short summary about the problem that lies before us.
I think it's something that we all come to grips with when we're in the space of digital technologies. And the classic one is that even though you work with colleagues and you have a deep abiding sense of the value of technologies in your classroom, that there's this puzzle of why some teachers adopt, some teachers adapt, and some teachers reject the technologies. Why you can have a really successful use of technologies for learning outcomes or for professional learning outcomes as well. And then you go to use that same approach even in your own class later on, and it doesn't come off the way that you thought. So there's this puzzle that we're not sure about, and so therefore after being frustrated by this, end up becoming an academic to research this problem.
Yeah.
But that's really risky for teachers. You feel comfortable when you've got this detailed lesson plan that articulates every single question and anticipates the responses by the students. How do we cope with that?
Well, that's one of the problems, isn't it? That we are dealing with a time poor situation. We have to deal with the curriculum, and then we have this complexity of technology that comes in. So no wonder we work to the lowest common denominator. The bit of technology that's going to work forevermore. We're not going to take those risks and hang out there. That the complexity of understanding how the technologies work, let alone the interaction between it and the students, let alone the interaction between all of that and learning, which is a different thing again, becomes so complex that no wonder people turn away. But it gets even more confusing, because we can talk about these kinds of layers and problems, and we talk about, well, let's do training with teachers.
Yeah.
But it's not a matter of training, it's about identity and about cultural practice, about having a different approach or understanding of how these technologies fit with me as an individual and my pedagogy. And so that kind of thing can't be trained in a one-off. It has to be over time.
Yeah. So it's like an evolution of oneself. It's not so much a problem equals this, therefore answer equals this.
That's right. Yeah.
There you go. You've been ed-tech-fied. Go forth and teach that.
Yeah, it's a sustained approach, and almost an enculturation of a different way of thinking. And that sort of led me then to talking about the idea of education and technology being a wicked problem, which has been talked about in the past. I haven't created this, but it's an idea that's resonated with me. And so this idea that a wicked problem is something that is it resists being solved. It resists a simple answer. That as soon as you do one thing, it changes the nature of it. As soon as you bring in a technology such as e-textbooks, for instance, you think, hey, that's going to solve our problem. It's going to be a bit cheaper. It's going to be accessible to the kids all the time. You're not going to get dog ears
not as heavy.
We have all these ideas about it. Plus, we can have some interaction in it, maybe, if it's really well designed, e-textbook. But the problem is, then you go, well, okay, but for instance, a real simple one is, generally speaking, when people engaging with on-screen text, they read 25% slower. That's what some research is talking about. And so how are you engaging with that?
Distracting hyperlinks and videos.
Hyperlinks, and of course we've got digital distractions. So there's been a fair bit of research talking about how devices with these multiple screens, multiple apps, so you can have Facebook in the background, other kinds of things. So this thing of digital distraction, yeah, sure, absolutely.
And that's going to be really challenging for the traditional classroom teacher that's used to have every kid on the same page.
Yeah.
And then looking at that child and saying, I need you to work with me. And we're all on page 63 in this electronic textbook that has hyperlinks that attract you for going off in all these wonderful places.
Now, all of that doesn't distract or doesn't negate the potentials of the technology, okay? They are just layers of complexity. So instead of thinking of these binaries, here's the positive, here's the negatives, and somehow we'll figure out a balance, and then we'll choose whichever option has got the more balance.
And that balance will be for everyone.
And the balance, of course, changes absolutely for everyone. And so if we think of them as layers of complexity, then we go, well, okay, it's not so much trying to do this balancing, it's deciding on how we negotiate for our particular class the kinds of decisions for the moment. And that's then takes me from this idea of the wicked problem, this irresolvable, this thing that's hard to solve, or maybe it's something that we resolve over and over and over again because it changes constantly. So going from that to then thinking, well, how can we optimistically, pragmatically, creatively, to refresh ourselves as professionals and our students, how can we move forward rather than getting bogged down and being depressed by this idea of these problems? And that's where I'm coming to the idea of design thinking. Design thinking is a great idea in terms of thinking, well, how do we move it? How do we create an approach to achieve a need? Design thinking is not out to get the solution to that one fixed point that we then release to the world, okay? That is an idea that we often embedded in design process, that we come up with an idea, we ideate, we prototype, we test it, evaluate, and eventually, here's the end product. And go and mark it, give it to your teacher to mark, or as teachers, let's go do it, here's our answer, and we'll forevermore use that same answer. The idea of design thinking should be more around this idea of evolution. So we constantly prototype, we constantly play, and this is then where I'm linked to the idea of, let's not get bogged down in process. Let's not get bogged down in this idea of high stakes. Realize it's technologies, it's a wicked problem. We're constantly going to have to evolve and change. So therefore, let's be a little bit playful. Let's adopt the idea that risk is part of that process.
I like the emphasis that you said that don't get bogged down by some of the time constraints that teachers have to, with the time-poor environment of a classroom, set curricula, squeeze out all of the innovation and creativity that in some ways they're having to reinvent it with every class and every opportunity.
Sounds tiring.
Well, it was a lot of work.
Different every day.
It's different of every child.
Indeed.
Well, I don't think we can discount the idea that we are time poor, that the curriculum does give us certain pressures. But I think we should be critical of the idea that if we're so focused on process, so focused on that object that gets handed to us by our students that we have to mark as an observable endpoint, the summative assessment, that we could be squeezing out the opportunities to do this creative divergent thinking. And I particularly think design thinking is really useful as a professional learning exercise. And that part of the thing about design thinking is really half of design thinking should be about trying to figure out the problem, trying to understand the nature of the issues and try to take on other people's perspectives and start to generate how might we statements, how might we change the situation. So for professional learning, I'd be recommending just coming together and talking about problems, trying to get into each other's heads. Don't try and figure out the answers. Spend weeks just talking about problems.
So for you, with your initial problem question that led you to down this path of being an academic, what happened to you when you suddenly began to see it as a wicked problem rather than something to find an answer to? And how has maybe your approach to design thinking and the things you've picked up kind of changed the way that you perceive that question?
Okay. So as soon as I changed my idea just around this idea of a wicked problem, and that was part of me working through many years of teaching postgraduate studies around instructional design, and design inherently should be an iterative kind of process. And so it all boils together to this notion of I no longer have to worry or in my research or in my teaching to try and explain that this technology or this practice, because it's not necessarily just the wiki technology, it might be the practice around the wiki, has to be the answer. And then I need to justify it, or I need to try and say, if you just do it this way, it's going to be a great idea. Here's the evidence. So we should strip away this notion that we're trying to demonstrate or provide evidence to say this works. We should be saying this worked for this moment. This satisfies the situation.
That was quite refreshing, because you actually gave me a feeling when you showed me the design model. It just wasn't a cycle. It was this iterative process of bouncing around at different points and teachers feeling comfortable about that, that there wasn't one correct answer that the students had to try and guess, that you could accept a suite of different responses maybe to solving something. I particularly liked when you challenge us to the notion that at what point did we ever take students and they were stuck? What did you mean by that?
Well, getting stuck is really hard. And first of all, teachers, as a general rule, we don't like to see our students stuck so much. You know, we go and try and help them. We see someone having a bit of
My brain's hurting, I better fix it.
You see someone who can't quite get over a hurdle, so you go and actually tell them the answer, tell them the next step. But of course, we know sort of theories such as, you know, social constructivism and sort of, you know, the more capable other and scaffolding and these kinds of things. But at the end of the day, you don't want to jump in too fast. Getting stuck sometimes is the point of being able to generate new ideas, or actually that's a skill in itself, is trying to figure out, oh, I am stuck, how might I get unstuck? And practicing that is an important thing. So there's some there is some research and there's some discussions around getting stuck and having challenges, and sometimes it's useful to think, well, I might set up an exercise where I will purposely get a student to get stuck, and then to start saying, well, how might you get out of that situation? And simple brain games or brain exercises, some classic ones like saying, come up with 100 ideas of using pipe cleaners or Chanel stems.
We've got to invite you back and actually run something like that, Amanda. We can maybe try one of the activities that Michael ran.
That sounds fun,
Let's make that so.
So doing that, of course, you'll find that you start to run out of ideas very quickly. So then the matter of going, well, how do I get unstuck? What are different mechanisms by which? And that's going to help. You know, it's a strategy, it's a thinking skill.
I really loved, because you get set as the challenge of how many things can you make with a pipe cleaner, and it was an open-ended brainstorming kind of question. You stopped us partway through and threw in even more questions that kind of opened up a whole new kind of thought processes, which was really, really interesting. We'd just kind of been looking at it and thinking, okay, well, what can I physically make with it? And you added in some extra things like, well, what if it was enormous? Or what would Lady Gaga do with it? I'm still pondering that. I'm sure there's something really interesting and creative.
I can make a very small NBN. I think our Prime Minister would be proud of me. Michael, it was a really fun session. I really enjoyed it. And even though you took us on a journey that didn't have the clear-cut answer or the one-sentence quote, what I think you made us do was feel very comfortable about the uncertainty. And for me, that's what teaching was about. It had this idea of being a fun merchant, being able to celebrate stuff, but also asking the tough questions and not necessarily knowing the answers ourselves. And you made us feel good about that. And thank you.
I think that idea of not finding one answer and redefining it as a wicked problem, that really speaks to me. And I've got this sense of, okay, now this different perspective, I can tackle that question in a different way. So thank you for that.
Now, you've got something to show us here. So could you mention this? And the link will be in
It's even blue inside. I'm thrilled. So tell us about this
orange
masterpiece.
on the cover.
It's a fantastic new book. Jeff Romeo and myself edited, and some wonderful authors who you'll know from all around from Australia, including significant people in Queensland, where this conference is.
Dr. Jason Zagami, I believe.
Yes, Jason's in there. Excellent. And Professor Marg Lloyd is in there, and many others from Queensland as well. And so this book really is not about what to do with technologies, but the critical issues that we need to keep in our mind. So it speaks to this idea of the wicked problem, and it gives us sort of an armory of concerns.
It's not really providing answers, it's extending the discussion and helping us unpack the problem for ourselves. Yeah. Awesome.
Okay.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Michael.
Thank you.
And I've enjoyed talking to you today. And I look forward to coming back and we'll run one of the activities that you had with the group again. Thank you.
Cheers.